Compliance frameworks often include all the right components: risk assessment, monitoring, reporting, governance. Natalie McManus explains that the challenge is not what is included, but how these components connect in practice. The distinction changes how organizations design and operate compliance programs. Welcome back. You're listening to RiskMasters, the download, where I share bite-sized insights from our latest interviews. This insight comes from a conversation with Jennifer Gary and Natalie McManus, where we explore one of the core ideas from their book, How to be a Chief Compliance Officer. We break down the impact wheel and how it reframes compliance as a continuous, integrated system rather than a set of standalone activities. Here is Natalie.
So what problem does the impact wheel solve that traditional compliance frameworks do not?
Another excellent question. Integration and flexibility. So if you take the ISO standards on compliance programs, they're very good. They give you all of the fundamental components of what you need, but they don't put it into practice for you. Same with the US sentencing guidelines. Like there's a real sense of intuition about what good compliance looks like. It'll have some monitoring, it'll have a risk assessment, it'll have reporting, it'll have governance, it'll have policy. But the connectivity of these elements is what really makes them powerful. And by putting it through the risk management lifecycle, which to be fair, a lot of firms have already started to adopt, but not quite so simply in the way that we've done it. There's always a piece that gets left out of the model because it doesn't fit. The impact wheel is meant to simplify and it give everything its home, but also show how everything works together. So you take risk assessment as an example. Normally in traditional compliance models, you do a risk assessment, it sets your book of work for the year, it sets your monitoring for the year, then you come back to it in a year's time and you refresh it. And if you're really lucky you've got the tech, you might be doing that on a quarterly basis. But risk assessment is actually a real-time, dynamic, brain-activated decision point. It's something that happens at a water cooler. It's something that happens when a new product is launched. It's something that happens every time you're given new information about a breach or a changing regulation or an emerging risk. So what our impact wheel looks to do is say, rather than disassociating your risk assessment as this siloed program, you weave how you would calculate risk at year end. You weave that into those points along the way. So whenever you have identified a new or changing compliance risk, that's the point at which you measure it. That's the point at which you use a consistent mechanism that then surfaces whether something's within your compliance risk appetite or not. And that informs how you then take action to protect. And that action might be, we have to review our policy. That action might be, we have to increase hiring, or we have to put in a technical gateway for some decision-making point. Or it might simply be we have to not take a decision to launch a product. And then from there, you go through to, what have we done? IMP, impact.
Protect.
We've done identify, measure, protect, to assess and assure. So that's when you then use all of this process to then do your monitoring, and it's iterative. It's done on the basis of the information you have at any given point in time. So it's agile monitoring, and it's done as an activity with a sense of what is live, what is current, not what was relevant 12 months ago. And then from there, the idea is that you surface issues, which then brings you to correct. But we, of course, know that issues get surfaced through other channels, not just activity by compliance. A lot of it's self-escalated, sometimes it's whistleblowing. And then from there, you then have your tell segment of the wheel, which wraps up together all of this intelligence, and it then feeds straight back into identification, which is exactly what you'd see in a risk wheel of that continuous dynamic cycle. And I think what makes our wheel different is we do not specify that these are big C compliance department activities. We specify that this is an ecosystem of activity that is done by control functions and oversight. And so if you're a small firm and you can't afford a compliance monitoring function, then audit does your monitoring activity. And if you are a firm that is lightly regulated from a product perspective, then perhaps your CFO might take on some more of the responsibilities around control and oversight. And so by being team agnostic, we empower organizations to take principles and essentially apply our model to their organization in a way that works. Too often you'll find models get wedded to a particular industry and they work up to a point, and then the organization changes or becomes more complex and they cease working. And as I say, then you have these little bits of activity that get carved out of the model you've built until it becomes unmanageable. So one thing I think Jenny and I can definitely agree on is that simplicity leads to mastery. Um, and the simpler your model, the easier it is for people to understand, and then they will understand their place within it. Um, so there are more complex versions of our impact wheel that do split out your inner functions that are your compliance hub and your outer functions, which are done by spokes within your business. But we were really keen to write a book that built on the principles that were industry agnostic and were organization agnostic, so that your new CCO can basically be creative within the purpose of their own organization.